My name is Naya, and I am 32 years old. I was lying in a hospital bed with a tube down my throat, while my sister was on Instagram Live giving a tour of my $3 million home like she just won the lottery. She thought she was moving up in the world, but she didn't realize she was actually moving straight into a trap I'd set months ago. Before I tell you how I turned her big move into a big mistake, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever been underestimated by the people who are supposed to love you most. Now, y'all, let's get into it because the audacity was at an all-time high that Tuesday morning. The hospital room was quiet, except for the rhythmic, annoying beep of the heart monitor and the soft hum of the air conditioner. It smelled like industrial-grade bleach and those cheap, scratchy blankets they give you when you're stuck in the private wing of Piedmont Hospital. I'd just come out of emergency gallbladder surgery. My side felt like a professional boxer had used it for target practice, and my throat was as dry as a Sunday morning sermon in a church with no AC. I reached for my phone on the tray table. It was a struggle. My hand was shaking and the IV line tugged at my skin, but I needed a distraction. I opened Instagram thinking I'd see some travel photos or maybe a recipe for some 7-cheese macaroni. Instead, the first thing that popped up was a notification. Tiff_the Queen is live. I clicked it. My heart rate monitor started picking up speed. Beep, 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 beep. Hey, my royal court, you know I told y'all God was about to do an exceedingly abundantly thing in my life. Tiffany's voice boomed through my phone speakers. She was doing that fake, high-pitched influencer laugh that always made my teeth ache. The camera flipped, and I felt the blood drain from my face. She wasn't in her cramped $2,200 a month apartment in Sandy Springs. No, ma'am. She was standing in my foyer with the $22,000 Italian Calacatta marble floors that I'd saved up for 3 years to install. She was spinning around, her cheap synthetic hair extensions whipping against her neck while she gestured to my custom-made $8,000 crystal chandelier as if she'd picked it out herself. "Look at the light hitting these crystals, y'all," she said, squinting into the camera. "We finally moved into the estate. Buckhead living suits me, doesn't it? I always told Marcus that we deserved a space that matched our vibration." I watched, frozen, as Marcus walked into the frame. Marcus is Tiffany's boyfriend. Well, fiancé, if you count the $300 cubic zirconia ring he bought her from a kiosk at the mall. He was wearing my late father's Patek Philippe watch. That watch is worth $65,000. It was supposed to be in my floor safe, tucked away under the $2,500 Turkish rug in my study. "The math isn't mathing," I muttered to the empty hospital room, but my voice was just a gravelly rasp. Marcus leaned against my kitchen island, the one made of solid $5,000 waterfall quartz, and took a bite of an apple. He looked smug. He looked like he'd just pulled off the heist of the century. He was wearing a tracksuit that was clearly a knockoff, the kind where the logo is just a little too tilted to be real, but he was acting like he owned every square inch of that 3,500 square foot house. "We worked hard for this," Marcus said, nodding to the camera. "No more living small. We're expanding the empire." I felt a sharp sting in my side, and it wasn't just the surgery. It was the disrespect. I am a boring pharmacist. That's what they call me at every Sunday dinner at Big Mama's house. While Tiffany is out here building a brand and Marcus is investing in crypto, I'm the one who stands on my feet for 12 hours a day, counting pills, and managed to pay off a $3 million mortgage in record time. To them, I'm just the gray rock, the plain, quiet sister who doesn't wear labels and drives a 10-year-old car because I'd rather put my money into appreciating assets. They think I'm broke because I don't perform wealth. They think I'm a pushover because I didn't complain when Tiffany borrowed $500 for her car note and never paid it back. But watching Tiffany walk into my primary bedroom, my sanctuary, was the last straw. She flopped onto my $12,000 Hasten's mattress, the one that's handmade and feels like sleeping on a cloud. She didn't even take off her shoes. She was wearing those dirty, scuffed sneakers on my $600 Egyptian cotton sheets. I think I'm gonna turn this room into my content studio, Tiffany told her 300 viewers. My sister, Naya, she's staying in a little place for a while. She told me she couldn't really handle the upkeep of a place like this. You know how some people just aren't meant for the big leagues? The comments were flying by. Goals, you deserve it, sis. Where is the sister at now? LOL. I felt a cold, calm sensation wash over me. It's the feeling I get when I'm titrating a high-risk medication. Precision. Focus. No room for error. I didn't type a comment. I didn't call her. I didn't send a frantic text to Mama Joyce. I just watched. I watched Tiffany walk into my walk-in closet. She bypassed my scrubs and went straight for the back, where I keep the financial porn section of my life. She pulled out my vintage $14,000 Chanel handbag, the black quilted one with the gold hardware that I bought to celebrate my first six-figure bonus. I think I might sell some of this old stuff on Patek, she giggled. It's a little too librarian for my taste. We need to clear out the energy in here. She was talking about my property like it was junk. She was talking about my life like it was a garage sale. Now y'all won't believe what happened next. A nurse walked in, a sweet older woman named Mrs. Higgins. She looked like she'd been a church mother for 40 years, the kind who wears a hat the size of a satellite dish on Easter Sunday. She saw my face and immediately came to the bedside. Honey, your heart rate is climbing. You need to breathe. Don't make me call the doctor in here, she said, her voice full of that bless your heart energy. I'm fine, Mrs. Higgins, I managed to say, my voice getting stronger with every second of footage I recorded. I'm just watching a movie. It's a comedy. Well, it must be a dark one, she said, adjusting my IV. You look like you're ready to go to war. Not a war, I said, finally closing the Instagram app. An eviction. I waited until she left the room. I took a deep breath, ignoring the pull of the stitches in my abdomen. I opened my banking app. I didn't look at my checking account. I looked at my security system app. I have 32 hidden cameras in that house. Tiffany only knows about the Ring doorbell. She doesn't know about the pinhole cameras in the crown molding or the ones disguised as smoke detectors. I saw them in high definition. Tiffany was currently pouring a glass of my $250 bottle of vintage Veuve Clicquot into a plastic solo cup. Marcus was sitting in my office trying to guess the password to my $2,000 iMac. He thought he was a genius. He thought that because I was sedated and sliced open, I was defenseless. He didn't realize that my boring IT background meant I had a digital kill switch for every electronic in that house. I leaned back against the thin hospital pillow and smiled. I looked at the clock. It was 11:45 in the morning. Enjoy the champagne, Tiffany, I whispered to the empty room. Because by this time tomorrow, the only thing you're going to be drinking is the sink water in a holding cell. I had the evidence. I had the deeds. And most importantly, I had the sheriff's private cell phone number on speed dial. He thought he'd won, but he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe. I was still staring at the blank screen of my phone, the image of Marcus wearing my daddy's $65,000 Paytech Philippe burned into my retinas when the heavy hospital door creaked open. I didn't even have to look up to know who it was. The scent hit me first. A cloud of white diamonds perfume so thick it could have knocked a buzzard off a gut wagon, followed by the clicking of heels that sounded like a soldier on a march. In walked Mama Joyce. Now, y'all, my mother is the kind of woman who treats the church aisle like a Parisian runway and the choir stand like her own personal throne. She was draped in a $2,500 St. John knit suit that I'd bought her for her 65th birthday, carrying a $3,200 Louis Vuitton Neverfull bag that was stuffed to the brim with church bulletins and peppermint candies. She didn't come over to kiss my forehead. She didn't ask the nurse about my vitals. She didn't even mention the fact that I had 4 fresh incisions in my stomach. Instead, she walked over to the window, pulled back the plastic blinds, and sighed like she was the one who'd been under the knife. "The light in here is just so clinical, Naya," she said, her voice dripping with that fake sweet honey she uses when she's about to ask for a favor that benefits everyone but me. "It's not good for your spirit. You need to be surrounded by family. You need to be home." I adjusted my pillow, the movement sending a hot flash of pain through my side. I didn't wince. I kept my face as flat as a $300 piece of plywood. "I'll be home soon enough, Mama. The doctor said maybe Thursday if my levels stay up." Mama Joyce turned around, her eyes sparkling with something that definitely wasn't motherly concern. It was the look she gets when she's spotted a 50% off sign at Neiman Marcus. "Well, about that," she started, smoothing out the wrinkles in her skirt. "I went over to the house this morning. Since you were stuck in here, I figured somebody needed to make sure the pipes didn't freeze and the dust didn't settle. And let me tell you, Naya, that $3 million estate is just too much for one woman. It's lonely, it's cold, it doesn't have the soul of a home." I stayed quiet. The gray rock doesn't give them ammunition. If you don't react, they have to keep talking to fill the silence. And that's when they tell on themselves. "So," she continued, "Tiffany and Marcus decided to help out. They've moved their things into the guest wings. It's really a blessing if you think about it. You're always so busy with that pharmacy job, counting out pills for 8 hours a day, that you haven't had time to actually live in that house. Now you'll have family there to greet you. We can even start having Sunday dinner there again, just like we used to at Big Mama's house before she passed." The audacity was actually making my head spin. She was talking about my home, the one I'd paid for with a $750,000 down payment, like it was a community center. "They moved in?" I asked, my voice low and steady. "Without calling me?" Mama Joyce waved a manicured hand in the air. She was wearing a $1,800 David Yurman bracelet that she'd borrowed from my jewelry box 3 months ago and never returned. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Nia. You were under anesthesia. We didn't want to stress you out with the logistics. Marcus is a man of action, you know? He's been moving furniture all morning. He even said he's going to turn that dusty old library of yours into a media room for his crypto trading. He said that room was a waste of space for someone who only reads medical journals." That dusty library contained my collection of first edition books and a $4,200 mahogany desk that had been a gift to myself for finishing my doctorate. "And Tiffany?" I asked. "What is she doing?" "She's finally getting her business off the ground," Mama Joyce beamed. "She's using the primary suite as her backdrop for her Level Up masterclass. She told me the natural light in there makes her look like $1 million. She's already started selling some of those old bags you had shoved in the back of the closet. She said you haven't worn them in years, and the energy was stagnant. She's turned them into capital for her brand. I felt my pulse thudding in my neck. She was talking about my $14,000 Chanel and my $9,000 Hermes. She was talking about theft. But Mama Joyce didn't see it that way. In her mind, I was the golden child who had too much, and it was her job to redistribute my wealth to her favorite, Tiffany. "Naya, honey, don't look at me with that pharmacist face," Mama Joyce said, sitting on the edge of my bed. I could smell the peppermint on her breath. "You've always been the strong one, the independent one, but you're being a bit of a narcissist right now, thinking only about your own space. Tiffany has struggled. Marcus is trying. As a family, we have to enable each other's success, not hoard our blessings." There it was, the therapy vocabulary. She'd been watching those daytime talk shows again, learning how to weaponize words like narcissist to gaslight me into giving up my own front door key. "I just need you to do one little thing for me," Mama Joyce said, reaching into her Louis Vuitton bag. She pulled out a crisp, white envelope. "Marcus found this insurance paperwork in your office. He said for the family to be properly covered while we're living there, you just need to sign this. It's just a formality. Something about joint occupancy and liability." I didn't even have to open the envelope to know what it was. Marcus wasn't smart, but he was greedy. It was likely a quit-claim deed or a power of attorney. He wanted the house. He didn't just want to sleep in the bed, he wanted to own the dirt it sat on. "I can't sign anything while I'm on these meds, Mama," I said, my voice as smooth as glass. "The doctors said my judgment is impaired. It wouldn't be legal." Mama Joyce's face shifted. The mask of the loving mother slipped, just for a second, revealing the sharp, jagged edges of the woman underneath. Her eyes narrowed, and she tucked the envelope back into her bag with a snap.
"You always were difficult, Nia. Even as a little girl at Big Mama's, you never wanted to share your dolls. It's a shame that all that education didn't teach you how to have a heart for your own flesh and blood."
She stood up, smoothing her suit one last time. "We'll talk about this when you're sober, then. But just so you know, Marcus already changed the gate codes. He said it was for security purposes since there's so much high-value equipment in the house now. If you want to get in when you're discharged, you're going to have to play nice." She walked toward the door, stopping only to grab a handful of the expensive chocolates my boss had sent over, a $60 box from Godiva. "Rest up, Nia," she tossed over her shoulder. "You're going to need your strength for the welcome home party Tiffany is planning. It's going to be the event of the season." The door clicked shut behind her. I sat in the silence for a long time. My side ached, but my mind was moving at 100 miles per hour. They thought they'd boxed me in. They thought that by changing a gate code and moving in some furniture, they'd seized the kingdom. But they forgot one thing about boring pharmacists. We know exactly how much of a substance it takes to heal someone and exactly how much it takes to make them suffer. I reached for my phone and opened my banking app. I didn't look at my balance. I looked at the automatic payments section. "You want to play house?" I whispered. "Let's see how much you enjoy it when the lights go out." I tapped the screen 3 times. I didn't just cut the power, I did something much, much worse. He thought he'd won, but he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe. Leaving that hospital room felt like walking out of a freezer and straight into a frying pan. My side was still throbbing with a dull, rhythmic ache that reminded me of every $300 stitch holding my abdomen together. But I couldn't sit in that bed for one more second. After Mama Joyce walked out with her request and my Godiva chocolates, I knew I had to move. I wasn't about to wait until Thursday to see what else Tiffany had decided to liquidate for her brand.
Now, y'all, I didn't call a friend. I didn't call Mama Joyce to come pick me up and lecture me about family unity for 40 minutes. Instead, I opened my phone and ordered a Cadillac Escalade through Uber Black. The ride from Piedmont Hospital to my neighborhood in Buckhead was going to cost me $125.50. But I didn't care. I needed to arrive in something that reminded me, and them, exactly who I was.
As the car pulled up, the driver jumped out to help me. He saw me clutching my side and moving like I was walking on eggshells. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked, his voice full of concern. "I'm fine," I said, sliding into the buttery, black leather seat of the $65,000 vehicle. "I'm just going home to handle a little pest control." The drive through Buckhead is usually peaceful. I love looking at the sprawling estates, the manicured lawns that cost $5,000 a month to maintain, and the ancient oak trees that have seen more secrets than a Sunday morning confessional. But as we turned onto my street, my stomach did a little flip that had nothing to do with the surgery. The closer we got to my $3 million estate, the more my blood began to boil. Even from a block away, I could see things were different. My yard, which is usually a masterpiece of Zen-like precision, looked like a staging ground for a flea market. There were several unfamiliar cars parked along the curb, old, beat-up sedans that didn't belong in a neighborhood where the average mailbox costs more than their engines. We pulled up to my front gate. It's a custom-designed wrought iron masterpiece that cost me $28,000. Usually, the sensors recognize my car, or I tap in my code, and it glides open like silk. The Uber driver waited. I leaned forward, my hand shaking slightly, and punched my birth year into the keypad. Beep, beep, beep. A harsh red light flashed. Access denied. I tried again, slower this time. Maybe my brain was still foggy from the anesthesia. Beep, beep, beep. Access denied. "The code isn't working, ma'am," the driver said, looking at the keypad. "I noticed," I replied, my voice coming out like a low-dose sedative, cool and clinical. "It seems my family has been busy." The math wasn't mathing. Changing the gate codes isn't something you do just to watch a house. That's a move you make when you're planning a siege. I told the driver to wait, and I stepped out of the car. Every step felt like a hot needle was being dragged through my side, but I made it to the pedestrian gate. I pressed the intercom button. I waited. About 30 seconds later, a voice crackled through the speaker. It was Marcus. He sounded like he was chewing something. "Yeah, who is it? We aren't expecting any deliveries today," he said, his voice full of an unearned authority that made my skin crawl. "Marcus? It's Naya. Open the gate," I said. There was a long silence. I could hear muffled laughter in the background, Tiffany's high-pitched cackle. "Naya? Man, Joyce said you weren't coming home until the end of the week. You should have called first, sis. We've got a lot of high-value activity going on in here right now. It's not really a good time for visitors," Marcus said. "Visitors?" I nearly choked on the word. "Marcus, I am standing in front of my own gate. This is my house. Open it, now!" "Look, Naya, don't get all narcissist on us," he said, using that therapy word Mama Joyce loves so much. "We're just trying to keep the place secure while we build the business. We changed the codes for security. I'll have to check with Tiffany to see if she's decent before I let you in. She's in the middle of a $5,000 brand deal photo shoot in the master suite." I didn't argue. I didn't scream. The gray rock stays still. I just stood there, clutching my hospital discharge papers in one hand and my phone in the other. A minute later, the gate finally buzzed and swung open. I walked up the long, winding driveway. The landscaping I'd spent $15,000 on last spring was littered with empty soda cans and fast food bags. My heart sank when I saw a pile of boxes sitting on the curb, getting damp from the Georgia humidity. I recognized the labels. Those were my books, my first editions, my history. As I reached the front door, a $10,000 slab of solid mahogany, it swung open. There stood Marcus. He was wearing a pair of silk pajamas that I recognized immediately. They were a $2,000 set of Tom Ford loungewear that I'd bought for myself to wear during my recovery. They were 3 sizes too small for him, the seams straining against his shoulders, but he didn't care. He was leaning against the doorframe like he'd been born there. But it was his wrists that made my vision go red. He was wearing my father's $65,000 Patek Philippe watch. My father had worked 2 jobs for 20 years after graduating from Morehouse just to afford that piece of history. It wasn't just a watch, it was a testament. No, it was a solid piece of our legacy. "Nice watch, Marcus," I said, my voice dropping an octave. He looked down at it and grinned, buffing the glass against his stolen pajama top. "Yeah, I found this in the safe. Well, found is a strong word. The door was cracked open. I figured a piece like this shouldn't be sitting in the dark. It needs to be on the wrist of a man who's actually doing something with his life." "That watch belongs to my father's estate," I said. "And we're family, right? So it's all in the family," Marcus said, stepping back to let me in. "But listen, Naya, you can't go upstairs. Tiffany's got the whole floor locked down for her level up content. You can stay in the basement guest room for a few days, but you're going to have to stay out of the way. We're running a 6-figure operation here now. We can't have you cluttering up the vibe with your hospital smell and your boring energy." I walked into my foyer. The marble floors I'd paid $22,000 for were covered in scuff marks. My $8,000 chandelier was dimmed to a low, tacky purple hue because Marcus thought it looked more vibey. I looked at him, really looked at him. He was a fake baller in a stolen suit, standing in a house he didn't understand, wearing a watch he could never earn. He thought he'd intimidated me. He thought that because I was quiet and hurting, I was defeated. "The basement," I repeated, a small, cold smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "Yeah, just for a bit, until you find a smaller place you can actually afford," Marcus said, checking the time on my father's watch. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a $300,000 crypto play to execute in my new office." He turned his back on me and walked away, his cheap flip-flops slapping against my expensive stone floors. I stood in the center of my foyer, the house I'd built with every $4,000 paycheck and every 12-hour shift I'd ever worked. I felt the weight of the key fob in my pocket. He looked me in the eye and told me I was trespassing on my own land. That's when I knew it wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a war. The walk down the stairs to my own basement felt like a descent into a different world. Now, y'all, when I say basement, don't go picturing some dark, damp crawl space with spiders and old Christmas decorations. I'd spent $250,000 finishing this space. It has heated floors, a kitchenette with a $4,000 espresso machine, and a media room with a couch that cost me $7,500. It was nicer than any apartment Tiffany or Marcus had ever stepped foot in, but that wasn't the point. The point was that I was being treated like a tenant in a building I held the deed to. I dragged my suitcase, a $3,000 Rimowa that Marcus had scuffed while moving it, across the luxury vinyl plank flooring.
Every step made the stitches in my side scream, but I kept my face as smooth as a fresh jar of cold cream. Tiffany was already down there, waiting for me. She was leaning against the quartz countertop of the basement bar, holding a glass of my $50 a bottle sparkling water like she was doing me a massive favor. She was wearing a pair of my $300 Lululemon leggings and a hoodie from her alma mater, which was actually just a community college she attended for one semester before pivoting to being an influencer.
"Oh, Naya, you look tired," Tiffany said, her eyes scanning me with a mix of pity and triumph. "Honestly, it's a blessing we're here. You clearly can't take care of yourself, let alone a $3 million property. Mama Joyce and I were talking, and we think it's best if you just stay down here and rest while we handle the heavy lifting upstairs." "I appreciate the concern, Tiffany," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I was playing the gray rock to perfection. I made myself as uninteresting and as small as possible. I didn't mention the Patek Philippe on Marcus's wrist. I didn't mention the gate codes. I just looked at my fate. "We're even thinking of helping you out with your finances," Tiffany continued, her voice getting that fake sweet tone that always precedes a scam. "Marcus noticed you have a lot of dead capital sitting in your closets. All those bags and shoes, they're just collecting dust. We're going to help you liquidate some of that so you can pay for your medical bills and maybe find a nice, manageable condo in a cheaper part of town, somewhere where the vibe is a bit more your speed." "You want to sell my things?" I asked, looking up just enough to see her smirk. "We want to save you, Naya," she corrected me, tossing her hair. "You've been gaslighting yourself into thinking you can afford this life. But look at you. You're stressed, you're sick, and you're alone. We're family. We're your flying monkeys. We're here to do the work you can't." She actually used the term flying monkeys. She thought she was being clever, using the therapy terms she'd heard on TikTok to make her theft sound like an intervention. I almost left, but I knew that would break the character. "I'm just going to lie down," I said, turning toward the bedroom. "Good idea," Tiffany called out as I closed the door. "Marcus and I are having a few people over tonight to celebrate the relaunch of the house. Try not to come upstairs, okay? We don't want the guests to see you in your current state. It would really mess with the aesthetic we're building." As soon as that door clicked shut, the exhausted Nia disappeared. I didn't go to the bed. I went to the closet. Behind a row of my winter coats, I reached into a hidden panel in the wall. I pulled out a $1,200 burner laptop I'd set up months ago when I first started noticing missing $500 increments from my emergency fund. I sat on the floor, ignoring the pain in my abdomen, and opened the lid. The screen glowed, showing 16 different camera angles of my house. Now, y'all won't believe the scene upstairs. Marcus was in my office, the one with the $12,000 custom built-ins. He had a bottle of my $4,500 Ace of Spades champagne open on the desk. He wasn't even using a glass. He was swigging it straight from the bottle like it was a $5 beer. He had his feet up on my desk, and he was talking to someone on his speakerphone. "Yeah, man, the transition is almost complete," Marcus bragged. "The narcissist's sister is officially in the basement. She's broken. I'm telling you, by next week, I'll have her signature on the deed. Then we can flip this place for $4 million easily. I've already got the crypto mining rigs ordered. We're going to use her high-speed servers to run the whole operation. Her utility bill is going to be insane, but hey, she's rich, right?" I watched as he picked up a pen, my $500 Mont Blanc, and started doodling on my legal pads. He was practicing my signature. He was literally sitting in my chair, drinking my wine, practicing how to steal my life.
I felt a surge of adrenaline that no hostile morphine could ever match. They thought I was a boring pharmacist who didn't understand the world. They thought because I went to an HBCU and then worked quietly for 10 years that I was some kind of dusty librarian they could roll over. What they didn't know was that while they were out clubbing and building brands, I was taking night courses in cybersecurity. I didn't just know how to count pills. I knew how to track every digital footprint a person makes. I tapped a few keys on my laptop. I didn't lock him out of the computer yet. That would be too obvious. Instead, I installed a keylogger. Every time Marcus typed a password, every time he searched for how to forge a deed, every time he messaged his crypto bros about his new mansion, I would receive a copy. Then I flipped to the camera in the primary suite. Tiffany was there with two of her friends, the kind of women who wear $300 sunglasses indoors and have never had a job that didn't involve a ring light. They were going through my jewelry box. "This is the $14,000 Chanel," Tiffany said, holding up my bag. "I've already got a buyer on Poshmark for $8,000. It's a quick flip. Nia won't even notice it's gone. She hasn't touched this stuff in years." "She's such an enabler," one of her friends said, tossing one of my $200 silk scarves onto the floor. "She's lucky to have you to take this off her hands." I watched them for an hour. I watched them drink my wine, try on my clothes, and plan the gala they were going to throw in my house to celebrate their success. They were so busy popping my $4,500 bottles of Ace of Spades that they didn't notice the small black boxes I'd hidden in the crown molding before I ever got sick. I closed the laptop and leaned my head against the wall. I could hear the bass of the music starting to thump through the ceiling. The celebration had begun. They thought they'd won. They thought I was the gray rock because I was hard and cold and silent. But they forgot that a rock can also be the start of a landslide. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small encrypted USB drive. It contained the login credentials for my security firm. I wasn't just going to watch them. I was going to document every single crime they committed in 4K resolution. He thought he'd won, but he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe. Now, y'all, waking up in my own basement while the floorboards above me were practically groaning under the weight of Tiffany's ego was a special kind of nightmare. It was Wednesday morning, and the sun was hitting the buckhead trees just right, but I wasn't upstairs enjoying my morning coffee on the $15,000 wraparound terrace. Instead, I was sitting on the edge of a guest bed, nursing a lukewarm cup of water and listening to the muffled sounds of boss babe energy coming through the vents. I didn't even have to look at the cameras to know Tiffany was back on her nonsense. I could hear her high-pitched, fake sweet voice echoing through the ductwork. She was doing that thing where she talks to her followers like she's a motivational speaker, even though her bank account has been in the red since she graduated from that community college back in 2018. I opened my laptop. The pain in my side was a sharp 4 out of 10 today, but the anger in my chest was a solid 11. I pulled up the primary closet camera. Y'all, I almost dropped my phone. Tiffany was in there with her friend Lexi, a girl who's been trying to find herself on other people's tabs for the last 5 years. They had my $14,000 Chanel quilted jumbo bag sitting on the floor. On top of it, not on the shelf, not on a dust bag, just sitting on the floor like it was a $5 tote from a gas station. "Okay, guys, welcome back to the Naya's Archive sale," Tiffany chirped into her ring light. She was wearing my $350 silk robe, the one I'd bought myself for my last birthday. "We are clearing out the old energy today. My sister is going through a transition, and she asked me to help her liquidate some of these heavy assets.
This Chanel is vintage, it's classic, but honestly, it's a little too church mother for the new vibe of the house." Lexi giggled in the background, holding up her phone to record a behind-the-scenes for TikTok. "It's giving dusty librarian, Tiff. You're doing her a favor." "I know, right?" Tiffany said, tossing her synthetic hair over her shoulder. "So I'm listing this on Poshmark right now for $2,500. I know, it's a steal, but we need a quick flip to fund the new content studio in the East Wing. First person to comment mine gets the link." My heart did a somersault. $2,500 for a $14,000 bag? The math wasn't mathing. She wasn't just stealing my property, she was giving it away because she was too ignorant to know the real value of the things I'd worked my life for. It reminded me of Sunday dinner back at Big Mama's house. Big Mama used to say that some people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Tiffany was exactly who she was talking about. She saw a logo and thought it was just a quick check to cover Marcus's crypto losses or whatever scam he was running that week. I watched through the camera as Tiffany pulled my favorite $12,000 Hermes Birkin in gold Togo leather off the top shelf. This bag was my pride and joy. I'd waited on a list for 2 years to get it. I'd worked extra shifts at the pharmacy, standing on my feet until they swelled, just to pay the $8,000 deposit when my name finally came up. "And look at this one," Tiffany shouted, swinging the Birkin around by one handle. "This orange bag is kind of cute, but the leather is so stiff. I'm putting this up for $800. It's got a little scratch on the bottom, so I'm being generous." She was lying. There wasn't a scratch on that bag. She was just desperate for fast cash. "The audacity," I whispered to the empty basement. I watched her take photos of my $900 Manolo Blahniks, listing them for $50. She took my custom-tailored $3,000 Comfort blazer and tossed it onto a pile of junk to be sold in a bundle. She was treating my life like a clearance rack at a closing-out sale. Now, y'all won't believe what Marcus was doing while this was going on. I toggled the camera to my home office. Marcus was sitting in my $5,000 ergonomic chair, draped in a $4,000 Versace Rogue he'd found in my hospital bag that Mama Joyce must have brought over. He was on his laptop, looking at Poshmark notifications with a greedy grin on his face. "Tiff, we just got 3 sold notifications," Marcus yelled. "That's $3,350.20 in the account already. I'm gonna move that to the Kraken account and buy that dip on Solana. We're gonna triple this by tonight." "See?" Tiffany's voice drifted in from the other room. "I told you Naya wouldn't miss this stuff. She's probably upstairs. I mean, downstairs, sleeping off those meds. She won't even notice the closet is lighter until we're already millionaires." I felt a cold, sharp focus settle over me. The Grey Rock doesn't scream. The Grey Rock doesn't run upstairs and start a fight that ends with the police thinking I'm the crazy one because I'm fresh out of surgery and hysterical. No, the Grey Rock stays quiet and documents the crime. I opened a screen recording software on my laptop. I captured the entire Instagram Live. I captured Tiffany's face as she held up each item. I captured her voice admitting that she was liquidating my assets. Then I went to Poshmark. I didn't try to report the listings. That would take too long, and they'd just make new accounts. Instead, I did something a little more boring, pharmacist style. I looked up the buyers. Since I had access to the home network, I could see the outgoing traffic from Tiffany's phone. I saw the names and addresses of the people who were buying my stolen goods. Most of them were her flying monkey friends from her old neighborhood, people who knew exactly whose house this was and were happy to profit off the betrayal. I took a screenshot of every single sale. I saw my $7,000 Cartier love bracelet sell for $500. I saw my $2,000 Gucci loafers sell for $40. I saw the total climbing, $4,890.10. Tiffany and Marcus were high-fiving in the hallway. They thought they were geniuses. They thought they'd found a money glitch in the system called family. "We should throw that party tonight, Marcus," Tiffany said, walking into the office, "to celebrate the relaunch of the brand. We can use some of this cash to get a $3,000 catering spread from Chops. We need to show people we've arrived." "Do it," Marcus said, leaning back in my chair. "Nia can stay in the basement. If she comes up, we'll just tell her she's hallucinating from the pain pills. Mama Joyce already told the neighbors Nia's having a mental break, so nobody will believe a word she says anyway." I sat in the dark of the basement, the glow of the laptop screen reflecting in my eyes. I wasn't crying. I was calculating. They'd already sold $12,000 worth of my property for less than $3,000. They were planning to tell the world I was crazy. They were using my own money to throw a party in my own house while I sat in the basement. I watched Tiffany click Confirm Shipment on the Poshmark app. She thought she was cleaning out my closet. She didn't realize she was actually filling out her own police report, one sold notification at a time. She'd just committed grand larceny, wire fraud, and identity theft in under 60 minutes. I reached for my phone and sent a single text message to Auntie Sarah, my estate attorney. "The evidence is captured. They're selling the Birkin. How soon can we get the forensic auditor here?" I watched the screen as Marcus started ordering $10,000 worth of event decor on my saved credit card. He thought he'd won, but he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe. Now, y'all, I wasn't just sitting in that basement guest suite feeling sorry for myself while Tiffany and Lexi were upstairs playing boutique owner with my closet. I was down there in my $50,000 finished basement, sitting on a $7,000 velvet sofa, staring at the blue light of my laptop. I had my screen split, one side showing the Poshmark sales notifications and the other showing my home security feed. The math was definitely not mathing for them. But for me, the numbers were starting to tell a very specific, very criminal story. The celebration upstairs was getting louder. I could hear the bass of some trap music thumping through the vents, vibrating the $300 recessed lighting fixtures in the ceiling. They were having a party on my dime, in my house, while I was supposed to be recovering. But then, the basement door creaked open. I didn't scramble to hide the laptop. I didn't panic. I just tilted the screen back and pulled my $200 silk throw blanket over my lap. I went back to being the gray rock, dull, quiet, and completely uninteresting. Marcus walked in. He'd changed out of the Tom Ford pajamas and was now wearing a $3,000 tracksuit that I knew for a fact was bought with my emergency fund debit card that morning. He was still wearing my daddy's $65,000 Patek Philippe, and he was carrying a manila folder like he was some high-powered executive. He had a blue ink pen tucked behind his ear and a look on his face that was pure, unfiltered greed. "Hey, Nia," he said, walking over with a fake, concerned brother smile. "You feeling any better? You look a little less gray today." "I'm hanging in there, Marcus," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The pain is it's a lot." I bet," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed without asking. He smelled like a mix of expensive cognac and cheap ambition. "Listen, I hate to even bring this up while you're healing, but Mama Joyce and I were talking. With all these people coming in and out for Tiffany's brand launch, we realized we aren't properly covered. You know how insurance is in Buckhead. They'll find any reason not to pay out." I blinked slowly. "Insurance?" "Yeah," Marcus said, opening the folder. I had my legal team, the guys I use for my crypto ventures, draft up a liability waiver and some insurance updates. Since you are the owner of record for this $3 million property, we need you to sign off so the family is protected. It's basically just saying that if someone slips on the marble or if Marcus's business assets get damaged, the insurance handles it directly through our new LLC. He pulled out a stack of papers. On the top was a page that said Liability and Asset Protection Agreement. It looked official enough if you didn't know what you were looking at, but I wasn't just a boring pharmacist. I'd spent 4 years at an HBCU and another 4 in grad school reading fine print and studying chemistry, and y'all know, legal documents are just another kind of formula. I reached for the papers with a shaky hand. Marcus held onto the folder a little too tight, his eyes darting toward the signature line. Just sign right there, Naya. I'll handle the rest. I even brought a notary. Well, a guy who works for me who's a notary, so we don't have to stress you out with a trip to the bank. I flipped the page. Underneath the liability header, there was a document titled Quitclaim Deed. My heart did a slow, heavy thud. A quitclaim deed is the fastest way to transfer property. If I signed that, I was giving up my $3 million estate to Marcus Enterprises LLC for the consideration of $10 and love and affection. He wasn't trying to protect the family. He was trying to steal the whole foundation. Marcus, I said, squinting at the page like I couldn't see straight, this looks complicated. My head is still so foggy from the 300 milligram doses of gabapentin. Marcus leaned in, his voice dropping into that gaslighting, trust me tone. Nia, don't be a narcissist. You're always so obsessed with the details. This is for the family. If you don't sign this and someone gets hurt at the gala tonight, they could sue you for every penny you have. You'd lose the house anyway. I'm trying to save you from yourself. But it says deed here, I whispered, pointing to the word. That's just legal jargon for documentation, Marcus said, not even blinking. It's a deed of protection. Seriously, Nia, you're being an enabler of your own stress. Just sign it so we can move forward. Don't you want Tiffany to be successful? Don't you want us all to win at the Sunday dinner of life? He pushed the $500 Mont Blanc pen toward me. The same pen he'd stolen from my office. I looked at the pen. I looked at the Patek Philippe on his wrist. I thought about the $300,000 he'd already drained from my accounts. He really thought I was that high on meds. He thought that because I didn't scream when he changed the gate codes, I was a victim. I need to read it, Marcus, I said, handing the folder back. Maybe tomorrow when the meds wear off. Marcus's face transformed. The fake baller smile vanished and his jaw tightened. Nia, the notary is upstairs now. The party starts in 2 hours. We need this done. You're being incredibly selfish. After everything we've done to move in here and take care of this place while you were laying in a hospital bed, this is how you treat us? I'm just tired, I said, closing my eyes. Fine, Marcus snapped, standing up so fast he nearly knocked over the nightstand. Be that way, but don't come crying to us when the flying monkeys of the legal world come for this house because you were too stubborn to protect it. You're lucky we don't just leave you down here to rot. He slammed the door on his way out. I waited until I heard his footsteps stomp back up the stairs. I waited until the bass of the music kicked back up, louder than before. Then I opened my laptop. I hadn't just been reading the papers. I had a small, high-resolution spy pen camera clipped to my robe that Auntie Sarah had sent over via courier that morning. I had a clear, digital image of the quitclaim deed Marcus had tried to trick me into signing. I had his voice on record, lying about the nature of the document. I had him admitting he'd brought a notary who was in on the scam. I didn't just have a Poshmark scandal anymore. I had attempted grand larceny and real estate fraud.
Now, y'all won't believe what I did next.
I didn't call the police. Not yet. Instead, I logged into my boring IT server. I went into the smart home settings. I didn't just cut the power like I'd thought about before. No, I did something much more surgical. I went to the digital lock settings for the primary suite and the office. I changed the permissions. Marcus thought he'd changed the gate codes? Well, I just changed the internal lockdown codes. I set a timer at exactly 10 p.m. right in the middle of their gala. Every high security door in that house, doors that cost me $40,000 to install, was going to magnetically lock. And the only person with the master key on their phone? Me. I looked at the screen. Marcus was back in my office, throwing the folder onto the desk and pouring himself a $500 glass of Louis XIII cognac. He looked frustrated, but he didn't look defeated. He was probably already thinking of a plan B.
He thought he'd won because he had the papers. He thought he'd won because he had the notary upstairs. But he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe. Now, y'all, after Marcus slammed that basement door, the house finally went quiet for a few hours. I sat there in the dark, the blue light from my $1,200 burner laptop casting a ghostly glow over the room. My side was pulsing, a sharp, hot reminder of the $300 stitches I was still carrying. But I didn't reach for the pain meds. I needed my mind sharp. I needed to be the gray rock everyone expected, while underneath, I was shifting the entire foundation of their empire. I checked my watch. It was 2:15 in the morning. I tapped a few keys, and the side entrance to the basement, the one Marcus forgot even existed because he was too busy admiring himself in my foyer mirrors, unlocked with a soft, magnetic click. A few seconds later, she walked in. Auntie Sarah didn't just enter a room, she commanded it. She was my late father's closest friend and the most feared estate attorney in the state of Georgia. She was wearing a $4,500 custom silk suit in a shade of midnight blue that made her skin look like polished mahogany. On her wrist was a $35,000 Cartier tank watch, and she carried a $2,800 Prada briefcase like it was a weapon of war. She looked around my basement, her eyes narrowing as she saw my makeshift command center on the $7,500 velvet sofa. "Naya, honey," she said, her voice like smooth bourbon over ice. "Bless your heart. You look like you've been through it, but your eyes tell me you're already counting the bodies." "I'm just doing the math, Auntie Sarah," I said, leaning back, "and it isn't mathing for them." She sat down, placing her Prada bag on the $4,000 quartz countertop. She didn't ask for water. She didn't ask for a tour. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of files bound in thick, cream-colored paper. "I ran the preliminary forensic audit you asked for," she said, sliding a document toward me. "Marcus is even dumber than I thought. He didn't just try to forge that quitclaim deed. He's been using your social security number to lease a fleet of luxury cars for his crypto consulting firm." I looked at the paper. My heart did a slow, heavy thud. There it was, an $82,000 lease for a Cadillac Escalade and a $95,000 lease for a Porsche Taycan. Both in my name, both signed with a signature that looked suspiciously like the one Marcus had been practicing on my legal pads. "He's been busy," I whispered. "He's been a criminal," Sarah corrected me, her eyes flashing. "But that's not all. I traced the emergency fund transfer.
Mama Joyce didn't just move $300,000 into a wedding fund for Tiffany, she moved it into a high-yield offshore account that Marcus has withdrawal rights to. They aren't just staying in your house, Naya. They're hollowed out your entire financial life like a termite in a $5 million mansion. I felt a surge of cold, calculated anger. This was more than just family drama. This was a technical execution of my future. They were trying to leave me with nothing but the hospital bill and a boring reputation.
"What's the move, Auntie?" I asked.
Sarah leaned in. "We could call the police tonight. We have the identity theft. We have the Poshmark evidence. That $12,000 Birkin Tiffany sold for $800 is officially classified as grand larceny. But if we do it now, Marcus will claim it was a family misunderstanding. He'll use Mama Joyce to gaslight the judge, and they'll get off with a slap on the wrist." She paused, a shark-like smile spreading across her face. "Or we can set the technical trap. I've already contacted my friend at the Forensic Audit Division. They flagged every transaction. I want you to give them one last chance. It's a legal requirement to show you tried to mitigate the damages. Tomorrow, at Sunday dinner, you're going to offer them a way out."
"They won't take it," I said.
"I know they won't," Sarah purred, clicking her $500 Mont Blanc pen. "And that's exactly what the district attorney needs to see. Once they reject your mercy, we trigger the Red Wedding Protocol. I'll have the toxicology report on those vitamins Mama Joyce has been trying to give you, and the sheriff will have a warrant that covers every square inch of this $3 million estate." I looked at the laptop screen. Upstairs, in the primary suite, I could see the glow of Tiffany's ring light. She was probably recording a GRWM, Get Ready With Me, video, talking about how she manifested this luxury life while wearing my $350 silk robe. "Sunday dinner," I said, the words tasting like copper. "The golden child, the fake baller, and the church mother. It's going to be a full house." "Make sure you wear something quiet, Nia," Sarah said, standing up to leave. "Let them think you're still the gray rock. Let them think you're weak, broken, and ready to sign anything. The louder they are, the harder they'll fall." She walked to the door, then stopped. "Oh, and Nia, I checked on that $65,000 Patek Philippe Marcus is wearing. I've already reported it as stolen to the National Registry. If he even tries to walk into a pawn shop or a jeweler with that on his wrist, the silent alarm will go off before he can say crypto." I watched her walk out into the night. She was the shark in the silk suit I needed. I went back to my laptop. I didn't look at the leases. I didn't look at the bank accounts. I looked at the calendar. Sunday was 3 days away. I opened the smart home interface one last time. I didn't just set the locks. I went into the entertainment system settings. I uploaded a very specific file to the $3,000 projector system in the grand ballroom, the one Tiffany was planning to use for her Level Up gala. Now, y'all won't believe what was in that file. It wasn't a movie, it wasn't a brand presentation, it was a highlight reel of every single second of footage I'd captured from those 16 hidden cameras. He thought he'd won, but he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe. Now, y'all, Thursday morning in Buckhead usually sounds like leaf blowers and the distant hum of luxury SUVs, but inside my house, it sounded like a battleground of high-end appliances. I'd managed to drag myself up the stairs from the basement, moving slow enough that my $300 stitches didn't pop, just to get a decent cup of coffee. I wasn't about to use that $4,000 espresso machine downstairs when my $10,000 built-in Miele system was sitting right in my kitchen. I was standing there, leaned against the waterfall quartz island, when Mama Joyce drifted in.
She wasn't wearing her church mother hat today. No, ma'am. She was draped in a $2,200 silk caftan from Neiman Marcus, carrying a $300 crystal-studded tumbler filled with what I'm sure wasn't just orange juice.
"Oh, Naya, you're up," she said, her voice dripping with that fake sympathy that always makes my skin crawl. "You look a little peaked, honey. You really should be resting in the basement. Marcus said the light up here is too bright for someone in your condition." "I just wanted some coffee, Mama," I said, my voice as flat and uninteresting as a $400 piece of drywall. I was being the gray rock. No emotion, no tell. Mama Joyce sat down at the breakfast nook, looking out over my $5,000 landscaped garden like she'd been the one to pay the gardeners. "Well, since you're up, we might as well have a little chat. Just us girls, like we used to at Big Mama's house before everything got so complicated." She reached into her bag, that $3,200 Louis Vuitton Neverfull, and pulled out a gold-plated iPhone. She started scrolling through photos of Tiffany's Level Up Gala preparations. "Tiffany is so stressed, Nia," Mama Joyce sighed. "The catering alone for tonight is costing $8,500. And Marcus, well, he's trying his best to manage the investments. He told me you were being a bit difficult about those insurance papers." "I just didn't understand them, Mama," I whispered, staring into my coffee. "That's because you've always been so focused on your little pharmacy job," she said, waving a hand in the air. "You don't understand how the big leagues work. But don't worry, I've taken care of the heavy lifting. I moved that $300,000 emergency fund of yours into a secure account. I didn't want you accidentally spending it while you were loopy on those meds." Now, y'all, my heart didn't just drop, it froze. I already knew about the transfer from Auntie Sarah's audit, but hearing her admit it, hearing her act like she was doing me a favor by stealing $300,000 was a different kind of burn. "You moved the whole thing?" I asked, keeping my eyes down. "Every penny," she said, sounding proud of herself. "It's in an offshore growth vehicle now. Marcus set it up. It's supposed to triple by next year. It's for the family, Nia. We're finally going to have the life we were always meant to have. No more counting pennies like you do." I looked at her then. Really looked at her. She was wearing a $5,000 Cartier love bracelet that I knew she hadn't bought. She was sitting in a house I'd built with my own sweat, telling me that my $300,000 was now family property. "Is that why Tiffany is selling my bags, Mama?" I asked. "To fund the growth vehicle?" Mama Joyce's face hardened. The loving mother mask slipped just a fraction. "Those bags were stagnant energy, Nia. You're an enabler of your own clutter. Tiffany is just helping you move forward. Besides, she needs a new wardrobe for the gala. She bought a $6,000 custom gown from a designer in Paris. She has to look the part of the mistress of the estate." "The mistress of the estate," I repeated. "Don't be a narcissist, honey," Mama Joyce said, standing up and smoothing out her caftan. "It's just a title. We're all living here together now. It's a blessing. Now, why don't you go back downstairs? I've got the florist coming in 20 minutes. They're installing a $12,000 floral wall in the foyer, and you're just in the way." I didn't argue. I didn't tell her that the $12,000 floral wall was being charged to a credit card I had already reported as stolen 10 minutes ago. I didn't tell her that Auntie Sarah had already traced the offshore vehicle to a shell company Marcus owned in the Cayman Islands. I just nodded, grabbed my coffee, and started the slow walk back to the basement. "Oh, and Naya?" Mama Joyce called out as I reached the door. "Make sure you wear something decent for Sunday dinner. We're having the pastor over, We want him to see how united we are before we make the big announcement about the house."
"I'll be there, Mama," I said.
I got back to the basement and locked the door. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. It was steady. I opened the laptop and pulled up the forensic audit again. Now y'all won't believe the six-figure secret I found tucked away in the footnotes of Marcus's transactions. It wasn't just the $300,000 from my emergency fund. Marcus had taken out a $450,000 business loan using my house as collateral. He'd forged my signature on a home equity line of credit application while I was in surgery. He'd already spent $100,000 of it on a bulk purchase of crypto mining hardware that was currently being delivered to my garage. The math finally started mathing. They weren't just trying to live in my house. They were trying to bankrupt me so I'd have no choice but to sell the property to Marcus's LLC for pennies. They wanted to strip mine my life and leave me with the debt. I looked at the clock. The gala was only a few hours away. The $12,000 floral wall was probably arriving right now. Tiffany was probably getting her makeup done by a $2,000 celebrity artist. I felt a cold, sharp smile spread across my face. They thought they were the golden family standing in the light. They didn't realize that the gray rock they'd been stepping on was actually the trigger for the entire trap. I reached for my phone and sent one last text to Auntie Sarah. The loan is confirmed. $450,000. They're celebrating with my champagne right now. Trigger the technical trap at midnight. I watched the camera in the foyer. Mama Joyce was directing the florists, pointing to where she wanted the roses. She looked so happy. She looked like she finally had everything she'd ever wanted. She thought she'd won, but she forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe.
Now, y'all, Sunday dinner used to be the one thing that kept our family from falling apart. Back when Big Mama was alive, you didn't bring your attitude or your lies to her table unless you wanted a wooden spoon across your knuckles. But walking into my own dining room that evening, I realized the tradition had been hijacked.
The Gray Rock was about to sit down for a meal with 3 people who had spent the last week strip mining her life, and they didn't even have the decency to hide the evidence. The dining room was a sea of financial porn that made my stomach turn more than the surgery ever did. Tiffany had set the table with my $2,800 Baccarat crystal glasses and the $12,000 sterling silver flatware set I'd inherited from my godmother. The center of the table featured a massive $3,500 floral arrangement of white orchids and gold-dipped roses that smelled like a funeral for common sense. Mama Joyce was at the head of the table, looking like the queen of a country she hadn't even discovered yet. She was wearing a new $4,000 Gucci silk dress, likely bought with the emergency fund she'd drained, and she was pouring a glass of my $250 bottle of vintage Veuve Clicquot like it was sweet tea. "Sit down, Naya. You're late to your own welcome home dinner," Mama Joyce said, not even looking up as I pulled out a chair. "The pastor couldn't make it, but we're going to say grace and celebrate anyway. Tiffany has some big news." I sat down quietly. I was wearing a simple $200 pair of black slacks and a plain cotton top. No labels, no jewelry, just the boring pharmacist they all love to look down on. Tiffany was beaming. She was wearing my $9,000 Hermes Birkin, the one I watched her sell on Poshmark, on the chair next to her, as if it were a guest. So the Level Up Gala was a massive success, y'all. I've already got 300 new signups for my masterclass at $500 a head. That's $150,000 in projected revenue by next month. We're finally playing in the big leagues. Marcus chuckled, leaning back in his chair. He was still wearing my daddy's $65,000 Patek Philippe. He'd paired it with a brand new $5,000 tailored suit that screamed new money louder than a siren. And the crypto mining rigs are being installed in the garage tomorrow, Marcus added, stabbing a piece of roast beef. The high-speed servers Nia has in the basement are perfect. We're going to be pulling in $10,000 a day in passive income. I've already moved the $450,000 business loan into the trading account to maximize the leverage. He said it so casually. He'd forged my signature to borrow nearly $500,000 against my home, and he was bragging about it over Sunday dinner. The math wasn't just not mathing, it was a crime scene. That sounds like a lot of responsibility, I said, my voice low and even. I kept my eyes on my plate, which held a serving of mashed potatoes that probably cost $50 a scoop considering the catering bill. It is, Mama Joyce said, pointing her silver fork at me. That's why we need you to stop being so difficult, Naya. You're an enabler of your own stagnation. Marcus is out here building an empire for the family while you're just counting pills. It's time you stepped aside and let the real visionaries lead. We're going to have the official handover ceremony on Tuesday. The room went quiet. The only sound was the clinking of $12,000 silver against $3,000 porcelain. I took a sip of water. It was time. Auntie Sarah had told me I had to offer the one last chance. I have a counterproposal, I said softly. Tiffany rolled her eyes. Naya, please don't start with the pharmacist logic. We're talking about millions here. I ignored her and looked straight at Mama Joyce. I'm giving you all until Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. If you pack your bags, return the watch, return the bags you sold, and put the $300,000 back in my account, I won't call the police. I'll even let you keep the clothes you bought. You can leave quietly, and we can tell the neighbors you moved out for a better opportunity. No drama, no prison. The silence that followed was heavy. Then Marcus started to laugh. It wasn't a small chuckle. It was a deep, arrogant bark that filled the room. You won't call the police? Marcus sneered, leaning over the table. Nia, look around you. You're a gray rock. You're a quiet, boring nobody with a medical history of mental instability, thanks to the report Joyce and I drafted. You don't have the keys to anything anymore. I changed the gate codes. I've got the power of attorney paperwork sitting in my office ready for the notary. You think the police are going to believe a woman who's been hallucinating on pain meds over a successful businessman like me? I'm serious, I said, my voice never wavering. Tuesday at 10 a.m. That's the deadline. After that, it's out of my hands. Mama Joyce slammed her hand on the table. That's enough, Naya. You are being a narcissist and a classic scapegoat turned attacker. We have sacrificed our lives to move in here and protect this estate while you were sick. This is the thanks we get? Threatening your own mother? You should be ashamed. Big Mama would be turning in her grave. She probably is, I said, standing up, but not because of me. Tiffany stood up, too, her face flushed with anger. You're just jealous. You're jealous because I'm the golden child now, and you're just the help. Well, guess what? You're evicted. Not us. You. Marcus is filing the papers tomorrow. You can take your little boring life and find a $2,000 a month apartment in the suburbs where you belong. I looked at each of them. Marcus, the fake baller wearing a stolen legacy, Tiffany, the influencer built on a foundation of theft, and Mama Joyce, the enabler who had traded her daughter for a Gucci caftan and a crystal tumbler. Tuesday at 10 a.m., I repeated. Get out of here, Nia, Marcus snapped, turning back to his steak. Go back to your basement cave. We've got a $300,000 gala to finish planning, and you're ruining the vibe. I walked away from the table. I didn't look back at the white orchids or the gold-dipped roses. I didn't look at the Patek Philippe glinting in the light of the $8,000 chandelier. I walked down the stairs to my cave. I closed the door and sat at my $1,200 laptop. Now, y'all won't believe what happened the moment I sat down. I didn't cry, I didn't shake. I opened the smart home app and looked at the clock. It was Sunday night, 8 p.m. I had given them the chance. Auntie Sarah was right. The rejection was the final piece of the puzzle the district attorney needed. I clicked on a file titled The Red Wedding Reveal. I looked at the guest list for Tiffany's gala. It included every major influencer in Atlanta, the local news socialites, and even a few people from my HBCU alumni board. They were all coming to my house to celebrate a theft. I checked the status of the technical trap. The magnets were primed, the projector was synced, the forensic audit was signed and notarized by a real official, not Marcus's notary guy.
He thought he'd won. He thought he'd bullied me into a corner because I was quiet. But he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe. Now, y'all, Tuesday night in Buckhead usually has a certain kind of rhythm. The sound of luxury SUVs humming down the street and the soft glow of security lights reflecting off perfectly manicured hedges. But my house sounded like a full-blown invasion. They didn't wait for my 10 a.m. deadline. They didn't even acknowledge it. By 7 p.m., the $3 million estate I'd worked my fingers to the bone for was being treated like a public park for the flashy and the fraudulent. I was sitting in my cave in the basement, listening to the muffled thumping of a $5,000 sound system that Marcus had rented using my high-limit credit card. I could hear the valet drivers outside, parking G-Wagons and Ferraris along the curb. It looked like an HBCU homecoming tailgate, but without the class or the genuine history. This was all performance. This was the leveled-up gala, and I was the ghost in the machine. I pulled up the foyer camera. The $12,000 floral wall was the star of the show. Every influencer in Atlanta was posing in front of it, their ring lights clashing with my custom $8,000 chandelier. Mama Joyce was floating through the crowd, holding a $300 crystal tumbler, looking like she'd personally laid every brick of the house. She was wearing a $5,000 Chanel necklace she'd found in my jewelry box, telling anyone who would listen how she'd raised her daughters to appreciate the finer things. Then, Tiffany appeared at the top of the stairs. Y'all, she looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine, but the price tag was written in my blood. She was draped in a $6,000 custom gown from a Paris designer, clutching my $12,000 Hermes Birkin like a trophy. She was smiling, laughing, and doing that fake sweet tilt of the head that she used to do at Sunday dinner when she wanted Big Mama to give her the biggest piece of cobbler. "Welcome to the new era," Tiffany shouted over the music, her voice amplified by a $1,500 wireless microphone. "Tonight isn't just a party, it's a testament. No, it's a big sign that when you manifest your destiny, the world has to move for you." I winced at her word choice, but I didn't move. I stayed the gray rock. I was sitting on my $7,500 velvet sofa, my $1,200 burner laptop open on my knees. I had 16 windows open. I was watching the front gate, the office, the garage, and the grand ballroom. Marcus was working the room like a politician. He was wearing that $5,000 tailored suit and my daddy's $65,000 Patek Philippe.
He had a bottle of my $250 Veuve Clicquot in one hand and was slapping backs with the other. Yeah, man, the crypto mining rigs are going live at midnight. Marcus told a group of investors who looked like they'd never seen a tax return in their lives. We're leveraging the $450,000 credit line to sweep the floor on some new NFTs. It's a sure thing. Naya? Oh, she's fine. She's just taking a little mental health break in the guest wing. You know how some people can't handle the pressure of this kind of willful.
I felt the familiar sting in my side, a sharp reminder of my $300 surgery stitches, but it only made me focus more. The math was finally about to be calculated.
I watched through the camera as Marcus led a few VIPs into my office. He didn't know I'd already installed a hidden microphone under the $5,000 quartz desk. "Check this out," Marcus whispered, pulling a manila folder from his jacket. It was the quitclaim deed. I've got the signature. The notary is coming by in 20 minutes to backdate it. Once that's filed, this $3 million property belongs to Marcus Enterprises, LLC. We'll have the cash out by Friday. He was lying. He didn't have my signature. He had the forgery he'd been practicing. But he was so arrogant, so high on the scent of my $3,000 catering spread from Chops, that he thought the lie was already the truth. Now, y'all won't believe what happened at 9:45. Tiffany stood on the small stage they'd set up in the grand ballroom, right in front of the $3,000 projector screen. The room went quiet. All the flying monkeys leaned in, ready to hear how they could level up just like her. "Before we start the masterclass," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with fake humility, "I want to show y'all a little video of the journey. From the struggle to the $3 million estate. It's important to remember where you came from so you can appreciate where you are." She signaled to Marcus, who was standing by the control panel. He gave her a thumbs up, his stolen $65,000 watch glinting under the stage lights. He pressed the play button on the remote. But Marcus didn't have control of the server. I did. I'd spent the last 3 hours rerouting the signal. When he hit play, it didn't show Tiffany's manifestation slideshow. Instead, the screen flickered, and a giant, high-definition image of Marcus's face filled the ballroom. It was the footage from my office camera, the one from 3 days ago. The audio was crisp, piped through the $10,000 built-in speaker system. "I'm telling you, by next week, I'll have her signature on the deed." Marcus's voice boomed through the room. "Then we can flip this place for $4 million easily. The narcissist's sister is officially in the basement. She's broken." The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop on my $22,000 marble floors. Tiffany's face went from influencer glow to funeral gray in 3 seconds. The video cut to Mama Joyce in the kitchen, pouring my $250 champagne into a plastic cup. "I moved that $300,000 emergency fund of hers into a secure account," Mama Joyce's voice rang out. "I didn't want her accidentally spending it while she was loopy on those meds. She's lucky we don't just leave her down here to rot." "Turn it off!" Tiffany screamed, lunging for the projector. "Marcus, turn it off!" Marcus was frantic, stabbing at the buttons, but I'd already locked him out. I'd triggered the internal lockdown protocol. At that exact moment, the $40,000 magnetic security doors on every exit hissed shut. Clack, clack, clack. Nobody was getting out. The video on the screen changed again. This time, it was a side-by-side comparison of my real signature and the one Marcus had been practicing on the legal pads. Underneath, in bold red letters, were the words grand larceny, identity theft, real estate fraud.
I stood up from my $7,500 sofa and walked toward the basement door. I didn't need to stay in the cave anymore. I climbed the stairs, the pain in my side almost gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I reached the grand ballroom just as the blue and red lights of the Buckhead police cruisers began to reflect off the $12,000 floral wall. Tiffany was sobbing, her $6,000 dress looking like a rag as she huddled on the stage. Marcus was being pinned against my $5,000 quartz island by two officers who didn't care about his crypto empire, and Mama Joyce was staring at the screen, her $300 crystal tumbler shattered on the floor. I walked into the center of the room. I looked at the influencers, the flying monkeys, and the fake ballers. I didn't say a word. I just looked at my sister. "The math finally matched, Tiffany," I said, my voice carrying through the silent room. He thought he'd won, but he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe. The silence in that ballroom wasn't just quiet. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating silence you get right before a thunderstorm breaks over the Georgia pines. All those influencers, the ones who'd been sipping on my $250 bottles of Veuve Clicquot and taking selfies in front of my $12,000 floral wall, were frozen. They were looking at the giant $3,000 projector screen, then back at Marcus and Tiffany, then at the magnetically locked $40,000 security doors. Now, y'all, I didn't come running out of that basement screaming like a madwoman. I took my time. I smoothed out my $200 block slacks, checked the $300 stitches in my side, and walked up those stairs with the calm of a woman who'd already seen the end of the movie. When I pushed open the double doors to the ballroom, the light from my $8,000 crystal chandelier hit me, but I didn't blink. I just stood there, the gray rock finally standing in the center of the landslide. Tiffany was the first to see me. She was standing on that stage in her $6,000 custom gown, her $9,000 Hermes Birkin still clutched in her hand like it could save her. Her face was a mess. Her $2,000 celebrity makeup job was streaking down her cheeks in dark, ugly lines. "Naya!" she shrieked, her voice hitting a note that probably cracked my $750 wine glasses. "What did you do? Why are the doors locked? Turn that screen off. It's a deepfake. Marcus, tell them it's a deepfake." Marcus was sweating through his $5,000 tailored suit. He was stabbing at the control panel like a man trying to stop a sinking ship with a toothpick. He looked at me, and for the first time, the fake baller mask was completely gone. There was nothing but raw, ugly fear underneath. "You think you're smart, don't you?" Marcus spat, stepping off the stage. He adjusted my daddy's $65,000 Patek Philippe on his wrist, but his hand was shaking so hard the gold was rattling. "This is a private event. You're harassing us. I've got the deed, Nia. I've got the $450,000 business loan. This house is mine." "The deed you haven't signed yet?" I asked, my voice barely raised. "The one you were practicing my signature for on my $500 legal pads? Or the loan you took out using my social security number while I was in surgery?" The crowd gasped. I could see phones being held up, not for level up content this time, but to capture the downfall. The flying monkeys were already turning on their leaders. "I'm the victim here," Mama Joyce wailed, pushing her way through a group of influencers. She was still holding that $300 crystal tumbler, her $5,000 Chanel necklace glinting in the light. "Nia, how could you do this to your own mother after everything I did? I was just protecting your $300,000 emergency fund from your own bad decisions." "You mean the $300,000 you moved to an offshore account Marcus controls?"
I looked her dead in the eye. The money that's currently being flagged by the Forensic Audit Division? Just then, the internal lockdown sirens began to pulse, a low, rhythmic hum I'd programmed into the system. Outside, through the $20,000 floor-to-ceiling windows, the blue and red lights of the Buckhead Police Department were dancing across the lawn, reflecting off the G-Wagons and Ferraris in the driveway. Bam, bam, bam. The sound of heavy, gloved hands hitting the mahogany front door echoed through the foyer. "Open up! This is the Sheriff's Department. We have a warrant for the arrest of Marcus, last name, and Tiffany, last name." Marcus scrambled toward the back exit, the one that leads to the $15,000 wraparound terrace, but he forgot I'd locked those too. He slammed into the glass like a bird hitting a window. "Open the doors, Naya!" Tiffany screamed, throwing her Birkin at me. It missed and hit the marble floor with a dull thud. "We're family. You can't do this. Think about what Big Mama would say. Think about Sunday dinner." "I am thinking about Sunday dinner," I said, stepping over her bag. "I'm thinking about how you sat at my $12,000 silver-laden table and told me I was being evicted from the house I paid for. I'm thinking about how you sold my $14,000 Chanel for $800 to pay for this fake party." I pulled my phone out and tapped a single button. The magnetic locks hissed open. The front doors didn't just open, they were pushed aside as 6 officers in tactical gear swarmed into the foyer. Leading them was Auntie Sarah. She looked like a shark that had just found a buffet. She was draped in her $4,500 silk suit, her Prada briefcase in hand, and a folder of notarized documents that were about to end their lives. "That's him," Sarah said, pointing a manicured finger at Marcus, "wearing the stolen $65,000 Patek Philippe. And that's her in the stolen gown, clutching the evidence of grand larceny." The officers didn't hesitate. They moved through the crowd of stunned influencers like a hot knife through butter. Marcus tried to put up a fight, yelling about his crypto empire and how he was a high net worth individual, but he was face down on my $22,000 marble floors in 5 seconds. Click. The sound of the handcuffs was the most beautiful music I'd heard since my surgery. Tiffany was next. She didn't fight, she just collapsed into a heap of $6,000 silk and synthetic hair, sobbing about her brand and how her followers would never forgive her. "Wait," Mama Joyce shouted, clutching her Chanel necklace. "I'm the mother. I didn't know anything about Marcus's loans. I was just trying to help my girls." Auntie Sarah stepped forward, a cold smile on her face. "Joyce, we have you on camera admitting to the transfer of $300,000. We have the toxicology report on those vitamins you were giving Nia. You might want to keep that necklace on, because it's the last piece of jewelry you'll be wearing for a long, long time." The officers began leading them out. The influencers were frantically deleting their level up posts, trying to distance themselves from the crime scene. The $12,000 floral wall was being knocked over by the police as they cleared the room. I stood by the waterfall quartz island in the kitchen as they paraded Marcus past me. He looked at me, his eyes full of a venomous hate that would have withered a lesser woman. "You think you won?" he hissed. "I've still got the keys to the crypto wallets, Nia. You'll never see that $450,000 again. I'll rot in jail before I give you back a dime." I didn't say anything. I just waited until he was at the door, framed by the flashing police lights. "Marcus," I called out. He stopped and looked back. "I didn't just install cameras," I said, holding up my $1,200 burner laptop. I installed a mirrored server. Every time you logged into your Kraken account from my high-speed Wi-Fi, you were actually sending the seed phrases to my encrypted drive. The $450,000? I moved it back into the escrow account 10 minutes ago. His jaw dropped. He looked like he'd been hit by a freight train. Oh, and one more thing, I added, glancing at the watch on his wrist that the officer was currently unbuckling. The Patek belongs to my father's estate. You aren't even worth the leather on the strap. They were hauled out into the rain that had just started to fall. The gala was over. The house was a wreck, spilled champagne on the rugs, trampled flowers in the foyer, and the smell of cheap desperation in the air. I walked over to the front door and watched the cruisers pull away, their sirens fading into the Buckhead night. The Grey Rock was alone again. I looked at the mess in my foyer. It was going to take a lot of work to clean this up, but as I reached for my phone to call the 24-hour cleaning crew, I noticed something on the floor near where Marcus had been pinned. It was a small, crumpled piece of paper that must have fallen out of his pocket. I picked it up and smoothed it out. My heart stopped. It wasn't a deed. It wasn't a loan document. It was a blueprint of my house, with red circles drawn around the floor safe in my study, and a name written at the bottom that wasn't Marcus, Tiffany, or Mama Joyce. The police had the villains, but they didn't have the mastermind. Now, y'all, the sky over Buckhead didn't just open up, it absolutely poured, as if God himself was trying to wash the scent of Marcus's cheap cologne and Tiffany's desperation off my property. The rain was coming down in thick, heavy sheets, drumming against the $20,000 floor-to-ceiling windows of my grand ballroom. It was the kind of Georgia storm that turns the red clay into a swamp in seconds, and it was the perfect backdrop for what was about to happen next. The sheriff, a tall, no-nonsense man named Miller, who'd known my father since their days at Morehouse, stood in the center of the foyer. He wasn't impressed by the $12,000 floral wall or the $3,000 catering spread from Chops that was now getting cold on the $5,000 quartz island. He just looked at the handcuffs clinking around Marcus's wrists and adjusted his hat. "Naya, honey," Sheriff Miller said, his voice a low rumble that cut through Tiffany's hysterical sobbing. "We've got the warrants processed. We've got the footage from your servers. It's a clean sweep. You want them out of here now, or do you want to wait for the rain to let up?" I looked at the wreckage of my home. Someone had spilled a $250 bottle of Veuve Clicquot on my $2,500 Turkish rug. There were muddy footprints on my $22,000 Italian marble. My heart was steady, though. The Grey Rock doesn't feel pity. "Now is fine, Sheriff," I said. I sounded as calm as a Sunday morning before the choir starts singing. "The trash belongs on the curb, regardless of the weather." Marcus started fighting the officers again. He was soaking wet from where the rain was blowing in through the open front door, and his $5,000 tailored suit was already starting to limp and sag. "This is a setup. You're all going to pay. Do you know how much capital I control? I'm a high net worth individual." "You're a high net worth inmate, Marcus," Sheriff Miller said, giving him a little shove toward the door. "Move." Now, y'all won't believe the sight of Tiffany. She was huddled on the floor, her $6,000 custom gown looking like a wet dishcloth. Her synthetic hair extensions were starting to frizz and detach in the humidity, and she was clutching that $9,000 Hermes Birkin like it was a life raft. She looked up at me, her eyes red and puffy. "Nia, please," she wailed. "It's raining. You're really going to let them take me out like this? In front of everyone? My brand is ruined. My followers are watching." Your brand was built on my $14,000 Chanel and my $8,000 chandelier, Tiffany, I said. I walked over to the kitchen pantry and pulled out a roll of heavy-duty black trash bags, the kind that cost maybe $10 for a box of 50. I snapped one open. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. I tossed the bag at her feet. "You have 5 minutes to get whatever you can fit in there," I said, "and since you sold my vintage bags for pennies, you can use this hefty bag for your dignity, if you can find it." Tiffany stared at the plastic bag, then at me. She realized I wasn't playing. She started frantically grabbing whatever she could see: a pair of scuffed $500 shoes, a handful of my $300 silk scarves, and a bottle of my $60 Godiva chocolates. Mama Joyce was already being escorted out. She was trying to keep her head high, clutching her $5,000 Chanel necklace as if it were a holy relic. She stopped at the door and looked back at me. "You're a cold one, Naya," she hissed, her voice dripping with that bless-your-heart venom. "Big Mama would be ashamed of you, treating family like common criminals over a few pieces of silver and a house. You're the narcissist. You're the one who ruined this family." "Family doesn't forge signatures on $450,000 loans, Mama," I said. "And family doesn't try to gaslight their daughter into a basement while they live in her primary suite. You didn't just lose a house tonight. You lost a daughter. And frankly, the trade-in value for you was never that high anyway." The officers led them out into the downpour. I stood at the $10,000 mahogany front door and watched the perp walk. It was a masterpiece of justice. Marcus was pushed into the back of a cruiser, his head hitting the roof of the car. Tiffany followed, her trash bag snagging on the doorframe and tearing, spilling a $400 bottle of my expensive perfume onto the wet pavement. The glass shattered, and the scent of jasmine and betrayal filled the air. Mama Joyce was put in a separate car. She didn't look back again. The influencers and the flying monkeys were long gone, scurrying away into the night like rats off a sinking luxury yacht. The only people left were the sheriff's deputies and the forensic team. Sheriff Miller walked back over to me. He handed me a heavy gold and silver object. It was my father's $65,000 Patek Philippe. He'd taken it off Marcus's wrist before they put him in the car. "I think this belongs to the rightful owner," the sheriff said. I took the watch. It was cold and wet, but it felt right in my hand. It was the only thing in this house that actually had a soul. "Thank you, Miller," I said.
"We'll have a deputy stationed at the gate tonight," he told me, tipping his hat. "Rest up, Naya. The DA is going to want to talk to you first thing Monday morning. Marcus is looking at a good 7 to 10 years for the fraud alone. Your sister and mother? That's up to the judge, but I don't think they'll be attending any Sunday dinners for a while." I watched the last of the police cruisers pull down the long, winding driveway. The blue and red lights faded, replaced by the steady, gray rhythm of the rain. I closed the front door and turned the deadbolt. The house was empty. It was quiet. It was mine again. I walked through the foyer, stepping over the piles of discarded gala invitations and the remnants of the $12,000 floral wall. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. Not the $250 champagne, just water. I felt a strange sensation. For the last week, I'd been the gray rock. I'd been the victim. I'd been the boring pharmacist in the basement. Now I was just Nia. I looked down at the Patek Philippe in my hand. Then I looked at the floor safe in my study. The door was still slightly ajar from when Marcus had been trying to get into it.
I walked over to it, kneeling on the $2,500 Turkish rug. I reached inside to make sure my papers were still there. My hand brushed against something at the very back, something I hadn't seen before. It was a small, leather-bound ledger. I opened it to the first page. The math wasn't mathing. I thought I knew every penny that went in and out of this estate. But according to this ledger, my father hadn't just left me a $3 million house. He'd left me a secret that made Marcus's $450,000 fraud look like pocket change. He thought he'd won, but he forgot one small thing. I still hadn't found the real keys to the safe. 6 months had passed since that rainy night when the Buckhead police turned my foyer into a processing center. And let me tell y'all, the wheels of justice might grind slow, but they grind real fine. I was sitting in the back of a Fulton County courtroom, looking like a quiet dream in an $8,000 Brunello Cucinelli suit in the shade of oatmeal. I didn't have on a single logo. I didn't have on a single flashy diamond. I just looked like a woman who owned her time and her peace, which is the most expensive thing you can possess. The room smelled like floor wax and old wood, a far cry from the $500 candles I usually have burning in my study. I watched as the bailiff led Marcus and Tiffany into the room. Now, y'all, the fake baller was looking real broke baller today. Marcus wasn't wearing his $5,000 tailored suit or my daddy's $65,000 Patek Philippe. No, ma'am. He was draped in a bright orange jumpsuit that did nothing for his complexion, and his hands were cuffed to a chain around his waist. He'd lost weight, probably because the menu in county lockup doesn't include $8,500 catering spreads from Chops. Tiffany was right behind him, and she looked like a shell of the golden child she used to be. Her synthetic hair was gone, replaced by a short, natural cut that she clearly didn't know how to style, and she was wearing a pair of those cheap $2 plastic slides they give you in the system. She didn't look like an influencer. She looked like a warning. My mother, Mama Joyce, was sitting in the front row on the opposite side. She'd managed to avoid the orange jumpsuit by taking a plea deal that involved testifying against Marcus, but she wasn't exactly winning. She was wearing a $300 suit she'd probably found at a thrift store, and her $5,000 Chanel necklace was nowhere to be seen. Auntie Sarah had made sure that was returned to my safe months ago. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who looked like she'd survived 1,000 Sunday dinners with women just like Mama Joyce, peered over her glasses at the files on her desk. "Marcus' last name," the judge began, her voice echoing through the chamber. "The forensic audit, backed by the secret ledger found on the property, shows a calculated, predatory pattern of behavior. You didn't just steal money. You attempted to dismantle a woman's entire life while she was incapacitated from surgery. You forged a $450,000 loan and attempted to steal a $3 million estate through fraudulent deeds." Marcus stood up, his chains rattling. "Your Honor, this is a family dispute. Nia is a narcissist. She's an enabler who turned on us. I was just trying to manage the family assets. I had a crypto empire ready to launch that would have made us all tens of millions." The judge didn't even blink. "The only empire you're going to be managing is the laundry detail in a state facility. For the counts of grand larceny, identity theft, and real estate fraud, I am sentencing you to 12 years in prison with no possibility of parole for the first 8 years. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $525,000.50. Marcus let out a howl that sounded like a wounded animal. He turned toward me, his face twisted in a mask of pure, ugly hate. You think you won, Naya? You're still gonna be alone in that big house. You're nothing. You're just a dusty pharmacist. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just sat there like the gray rock I am, watching him get dragged out by two bailiffs who didn't care about his high net worth fantasies. Then the judge turned to Tiffany. Tiffany, last name, you were an active participant in the liquidation of assets that did not belong to you. You sold $14,000 worth of designer goods for pennies on the dollar, and you knowingly used stolen funds to finance a lifestyle you hadn't earned. However, given your lack of prior record, I am sentencing you to 3 years in a minimum security facility, followed by 5 years of probation. Tiffany collapsed into her chair, sobbing. She looked toward Mama Joyce, but my mother was looking at the floor. The golden child had finally run out of glitter.
Now y'all won't believe what happened when we walked out of that courtroom.
Auntie Sarah was by my side, her $4,500 silk suit looking crisp as ever. We were walking toward my new car, a $110,000 Range Rover autobiography in a matte black finish, when Mama Joyce stepped into our path. "Naya," she said, her voice trembling. "Wait, you've had your revenge. They're going away. Can't we go back to Big Mama's house this Sunday? We need to pray as a family. We need to heal." I stopped and looked at her. I thought about the $300,000 she'd moved. I thought about the vitamins that were actually sedatives. I thought about how she'd stood in my foyer and called me a visitor in my own home. "I'm going to the cemetery this Sunday, Mama," I said, my voice as steady as a $10,000 foundation. "I'm going to sit with Daddy and Big Mama, and I'm going to tell them that the house is finally clean. But you're not invited to that dinner. You chose your side when you helped Marcus practice my signature." "But I have nothing," she wailed, clutching her cheap bag. "Naya, I'm your mother. You have millions. You have that $3 million house. What is $2,000 a month to you? It's pocket change." "It's the price of a lesson, Mama," I said, stepping into the back of the Range Rover. I looked at her through the $2,000 custom-tinted windows. She looked small. She looked like a woman who had traded her soul for a seat at a table that didn't belong to her. As we pulled away from the curb, Auntie Sarah handed me a folder. "The final liquidation is complete, Nia. After paying off the fraudulent loan and recovering the crypto assets Marcus tried to hide, your net worth has actually increased by $2,100,000. That secret ledger your father left, it wasn't just records. It was the deed to a $5 million commercial block in downtown Atlanta that's been collecting rent in a trust for 20 years. I leaned back against the $500 custom headrest. The math was finally mathing in my favor. "The gray rock," I whispered to myself, watching the Fulton County Courthouse disappear in the rearview mirror. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd bullied me into a corner because I was quiet. He thought that because I counted pills and didn't wear labels, I didn't know how to fight. But he forgot one small thing. I'm the one who survived, and I still had the keys to the safe. The drive back to Buckhead from the Fulton County Courthouse was the quietest, most expensive ride of my life. I was sitting in the back of my $110,000 Range Rover autobiography, the kind with the massage seats that cost an extra $3,500, watching the Atlanta skyline fade in the rearview. Auntie Sarah was next to me, scrolling through her iPad, her $4,500 silk suit not having a single wrinkle despite the 3-hour sentencing hearing we'd just endured. "Now, y'all, there's a specific kind of peace that comes when you finally stop being the gray rock and start being the mountain." When we pulled up to my front gate, the one Marcus had tried to lock me out of, it didn't just buzz. I'd spent $15,000 upgrading the entire system to biometric facial recognition. The wrought iron glided open without a sound. The landscaping was back to its $3 million glory. I'd hired a new crew for $6,000 a month to rip out everything the flying monkeys had stepped on and replace it with fresh white hydrangeas and Japanese maples that looked like they belonged in a museum. I stepped out of the car, my heels clicking on the $22,000 Italian marble foyer. The house didn't smell like Tiffany's cheap synthetic hair or Marcus's stolen cognac anymore. I'd paid a specialty restoration team $10,000 to deep clean every inch of the ventilation and steam every square inch of the rugs. It smelled like $400 Santal candles and victory. "You're officially in the clear, Naya," Auntie Sarah said, setting her $2,800 Prada briefcase on the kitchen's waterfall quartz island. "The $5 million commercial block in downtown Atlanta is officially titled in your name. The back rent Marcus didn't even know existed, $350,000, has been moved into a high-yield trust. You aren't just a pharmacist anymore, you're a mogul." "I'm still going to work on Monday, Auntie," I said, a small smile playing on my lips as I walked toward my new Mila espresso station. This one cost $12,000 and makes a latte that tastes like a hug from an angel. "Why?" Sarah asked, laughing. "You could buy the whole pharmacy and turn it into a shoe closet if you wanted to." "Because," I said, watching the rich, dark coffee swirl into my $200 Hermes porcelain cup, "staying boring is my superpower. If people think you're just a regular girl counting out 30-day supplies of lisinopril, they never see you coming. That's how Marcus and Tiffany ended up in orange jumpsuits. They were so busy looking at the labels, they forgot to look at the law." I walked into the primary suite, the room Tiffany had tried to turn into her level-up content studio. I'd gutted the whole thing. I'd replaced the bed with a $20,000 custom-made frame and a $7,000 mattress that feels like sleeping on a cloud. I'd also installed a no-contact digital barrier. My phone now automatically blocks any number associated with the Fulton County Jail or Mama Joyce's prepaid burner. Speaking of Mama Joyce, y'all won't believe the audacity she had even after the judge lowered the gavel. She'd sent me a letter through her legal aid lawyer because she couldn't afford a real one anymore, claiming she was spiritually wounded by my lack of family loyalty. She said she needed a $5,000 a month stipend to maintain her lifestyle so she wouldn't have to move into a regular neighborhood. I didn't reply. I didn't send a cent. I didn't even read the whole thing. I just put it in the $500 shredder I keep in my office next to the $5,000 mahogany desk. It was Sunday evening now. The sun was dipping low over the trees, casting long golden shadows across my $15,000 wraparound terrace. This was the time we used to have Sunday dinner at Big Mama's house. I remembered the scent of her $200 Sunday pot roast and the sound of her laughing as she told us to keep our feet off the $400 velvet chairs. I realized I didn't need their version of family anymore. I was building a new foundation. I'd invited 3 of my closest friends for my HBCU days over. These were women who were actual high-net-worth individuals, doctors, engineers, and a judge, who didn't need to steal a Patek Philippe to feel important. I'd hired a private chef for $2,500 to prepare a meal that Big Mama would have been proud of: smothered pork chops, slow-simmered collard greens, and a peach cobbler that smelled like heaven. As we sat at my $12,000 sterling silver-laden table, the conversation wasn't about climbing or manifesting or gaslighting each other. It was about legacy. It was about how we were going to use our collective millions to fund scholarships for girls who grew up being told they were boring just because they were quiet. "To the gray rock," my friend Camille said, lifting her $600 Baccarat crystal glass, "the one who stayed solid while the world tried to break her." "To the gray rock," they all echoed. I took a sip of my $1,000 bottle of Chateau Margaux. The math was finally mathing, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to hide the numbers. After my friends left, I walked through the house, turning off the lights with my smartphone app. I stopped at the door of my study. The floor safe was closed, locked, and secured with a $10,000 military-grade encryption system. I looked at the $65,000 Patek Philippe sitting on the velvet tray on top of the desk. I'd finally found peace. I'd finally found my worth. And I'd finally realized that being underestimated is the greatest luxury a woman can have. I sat on my $5,000 custom chair and looked out at the Buckhead night. The sirens were gone. The rain had stopped. The villains were in cages they'd built for themselves out of greed and lies. I am Nia. I am 32 years old. I am a millionaire mogul disguised as a pharmacist. And as I reached into my pocket and felt the weight of the tiny gold-plated key that opened my father's real secret, the one that even Auntie Sarah didn't know about yet, I realized the story was just beginning.
He thought he'd won. He thought he'd taken everything because he had a forged deed and a fake smile. But he forgot one small thing. The safe he was trying to crack was just the decoy.
I still had the keys to the empire.